Baudrillard, the slave. The status of the slave is analyzed by Marxist theory retrospectively, starting from the status of the salaried worker. The latter does not dispose of his labor, nor of the product of his labor, but he does dispose of his labor power, which he can alienate, although not his person, which is his property. For his part, the slave disposes neither of the one nor the other. Thus, he is being defined as a function of the distinction between labor and labor power, which will be developed later, as the sum of these two elements alienated to the master. And the specificity of slavery resides, by deduction, in the master's ownership of the slave's labor power. But this is only an analytic reconstruction, because one reunites two elements consequently separated. It does not follow that their sum clarifies the earlier state. The radical difference is precisely that they were not separated, and that what comes to pass from the separation is not readable through anticipation, except by an abuse of analytical power. We are faced again with the presumption of the economic through the grid, labor, power. The symbolic relation, master-slave, is conceived as a kind of husk, whose real kernel will be extracted in the thread of history. In fact, in the thread of the theoretical model that will impose this principle of reality. What is lost in this process is everything that is exchanged in the master-slave relation, and everything not reducible to the alienation, exploitation of a labor power. The fact that the slave is not separated from the master in the manner of the free laborer implies that the master is not separated from the slave in the manner of the free proprietor or employer. Neither the one nor the other has the respective status of the individual and individual liberty. Neither confronts one another as such, which is the definition of alienation. A relation of reciprocity exists between them, not in the modern and psychological sense of a bi-univocal relation of two individualized subjects, that is, in the individualization altruism context that circumscribes our morality, but in the sense of an obligation, of a structure of exchange and obligation where the specification of the terms of exchange in autonomous subjects, where the partition as we know it does not yet exist. This is the level of the symbolic, and not of the autonomous subjects of exchange, nor of an object of exchange, labor power, nourishment, protection, autonomizable as a commodity. Instead, there is a dual structure in which neither the abstraction of value nor the imaginary identity of subjects come into play. The free worker finds his identity in the mirror of his labor power. His property, his liberation, as a worker, signifies his ascension to a privatized individuality, that is, to alienation. He is alienated not insofar as he sells his labor power, but insofar as he is an owner, disposing of it as if it were his own goods. For finally, what is it that allows me to dispose of myself if not privation, the right of the privatized individual who is isolated from others? This is an exorbitant privilege which the master never had over the slave, since it is only with slave trading, that is, when slavery is included within a market economy, that the master disposes of the slave to the point of being able to alienate him like other commodities. When one analyzes this stage, it is already a market economy that one is analyzing, and not the stage that is specific to slavery. In the original relation, the slave, or rather the relation master-slave, is unalienable, in the sense that neither the master nor the slave are alienated from each other. Nor is the slave alienated from himself, as is the free worker in the private disposition of his labor power. In every sense, liberation is thus characterized as the process of the interiorization of the separation, of the interiorization of a subjective, abstract essence, in this case labor power, over which the identity of the subject comes to fix itself. The slave's status is not of this kind. He is connected, and the sovereignty of the master is not the transcendence of authority as we know it. It is a personal domination that must not be confused with the scheme of master-subject and of slave-object, which is our form of rational and contractual exchange, in which each subject is an object for the other. Domination, as distinct from alienation and exploitation, does not involve the objectification of the dominated, but an obligation that always carries an element of reciprocity. We have a tendency to reinterpret the relation of slavery or servitude as the maximum limit of exploitation and alienation in comparison to our economic configuration and our psychology of subject and object. We consider the passage to salary labor as liberation and objective historical progress. Yet, this view participates in the illusion of Western humanist rationality, a rationality incarnated in the thread of history by the abstract political state, which, when instituted, attributes all earlier forms of domination to the irrational. But it is not true that domination is only an archaic and barbaric form of power. The concept of power, with all that it implies about the abstraction and alienation of social relations, about exploiter-exploited relations, etc., has value, strictly speaking, only when applied to our kind of social organization. To project it indiscriminately on earlier forms of domination, explaining the differences as some historical underdevelopment, is to miscomprehend all that the earlier formations can teach us about the symbolic operation of social relations.